I'm very excited to present Brunswick Exploration to you, a lithium exploration company with a portfolio of hard rock lithium projects in Canada. To talk about its highly prospective Mirage project, as well as upcoming plans at other assets, we have Killian Charles, President and CEO. I know you'll have a lot of questions after the presentation, so please put your questions into the chat box, and we will get through as many as we can. But before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print. For Brunswick Exploration, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar. Please read the cautionary note on page 2 of the Brunswick Exploration corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Brunswick Exploration specific disclosures. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Killian. Please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction there, Lena. Pleasure to be here today. Look, I know we have a lot to get through, so we'll jump right into it. You know, Brunswick Exploration is a company that is in constant motion, constant evolution as we continue to evolve and refine our exploration strategy. Since the start, our view has always been on making discoveries in the lithium space. That's why we launched our Pan-Canadian exploration program, which honestly was one of the largest lithium grassroots initiative period in any commodity in the world. You know, for a junior to go out exploring and making discoveries across the entirety of Canada, it's just not something that you see anymore. And so for us, it's always been a push and it's always been a belief that this is a new industry, one that has not seen systematic exploration. And actually, it really reinforces when you see the amount of discoveries that continue to happen over the course of the last few years. You know, when you think about copper, when you think about gold, there's not a lot left on that front. There's not a lot of new discoveries. In lithium, we're still such at an early stage that we're almost inundated with new ideas. In Brunswick, we're now taking this to a new level. You know, we always had a focus, and I've said this on previous seminars and other interviews, you know, we've always had a focus on infrastructure. We want to be within 50 kilometers from infrastructure, whether it be rail, road, power, tidewater. And that still animates a lot of our sort of staking strategy, but we're now also incorporating market strategy into it. What I mean by that is, let's think about this objectively. Let's think about 10 years into the future. The size and scale of deposits that are being found in Quebec is simply astonishing. It is something that is actually quite unique. We are seeing the start and the formation of a new world-class district between many peer companies, whether it's, you know, hopefully Mirage once we've done our work, whether it's Corvette with Patriot, whether it's Adina with Winsome, Arcadium with the James Bay project, you know, the new White Rock discovery. There's so many world-class discoveries, so many 100 million ton deposits that are being found in this region, that it's the James Bay region of Quebec, that it sort of underscores the start of this new district. And so it is starting to be my opinion, and in the opinion of the team at Brunswick Exploration, that as you start to see this new district form, this new region, this is where all of the leverage is going to happen, whether it be from an infrastructure perspective or from a refining perspective. We're blessed. We're lucky in Canada. We have, specifically in Quebec, actually world-class deposits. It's been a while since we've had world-class deposits. And so you would expect that the refining industry will also situate itself here. You would expect that the battery manufacturing industry will also situate themselves here to be close to that raw material. And so it's important for us to focus on areas that make sense, not just from an exploration perspective, not just from an infrastructure perspective, but also from a mineability. And that's what we're seeing in the James Bay. if we take a zoom in here on the James Bay, and yes, there will be forward-looking statements, you sort of have a lay of the land here with, what is known. Actually, some of these are going to be outdated already. What is known right now? And you see that our position with Mirage in the upper right corner really underscores why this matters, why we are very, very lucky but content to have such a wonderful asset. If you we're a stone throws away from Winsome, we're a stone throws away from Patriot. And if there's one area in Canada that is going to see lithium development, it's this part of the world. And to be drilling at surface large pegmatites like you do at Mirage is absolutely incredible. That's what we've been doing. We released a number of significant assays over the last few months. If I just jump to this particular slide here, so we're going to zoom in. And here we sort of have a lay of the land, but I want to zoom out a little bit, just give you a better understanding. This is the Mirage project. That little map you see is what we've been drilling. We've been concentrated in this 2.5 by 2.5 kilometer area. We know there's more. We know that we're just getting started. You have to remember, you don't have a lot of tools when it comes to remote sensing. If you don't see it, it's a little bit harder to find. And this is a challenge that's faced by anyone looking on the hard rock side. You're going to have to either look for till, you're going to have to look for, boulders, or just a plain new outcrop. And even beyond this little area right here we've been drilling, we know there's more to give. Last year, we had announced the discovery of a new showing almost 6 kilometers to the northeast. We know there's more lithium out there. We're starting to define new trends of spodumene mineralization from boulders. We have the large boulder train that sits here to the southwest of the project, but we're finding new trends as we spend more time on this asset. We're getting close to that 1-year anniversary at Mirage, but we're not there yet. You have to remember, last year we were faced with forest fire, so we didn't even get to do a full field season out on this project. Now that we've done so, we have a much stronger understanding of the project, and we have significant more drilling and more work that we want to do here. And that's exciting for us. Just what we've been starting to define is absolutely incredible. When you take a step back and you look at some of these things we've been finding, and I'll show you on the next slide here, we've outlined up to 8 main dikes. Honestly, there's a lot more than that. We're probably, objectively speaking, we're probably in the 24 to 36 amount of spodumene bearing dikes. We just consider here the ones where in a single hole, we've hit at least 10 meters width, but there's still so much more that needs to be done. As an example, there's a hole here, and I think you may see my mouse, and it's sort of in the middle of this area to the east of MR6. It hit 4 major dikes right at surface, single drill hole in that area. 250 meters from anything else. It hit 30 meters of nearly continuous spodumene mineralization at very high grades. We have a lot more work that needs to be done. Everything is open along strike, at depth. We have significant targets to go chase here. And, I think it's also important to even look at how these things evolve. Even just looking at Patriot's results, you have to put in the time. You have to put in the drill holes. When they were drilling that Vega zone and that Nova zone, those are areas that blew up from drill holes that didn't look that interesting. But as you continue, pegmatites have a habit of, growing and shrinking along strike and at depth. And you don't know until you've done your time. We haven't even drilled below 100 meters vertical. Most of these pegmatites only have less than half a dozen hole into them. So it's something that we are extremely excited to continue drilling. If you look at the results we've been putting out in this campaign, following our fall campaign, it has been from strength to strength, sort of tying into that last intercept where we put out 94 meters, nearly 94 meters at over 1.5%. That's the hallmark of assets that have a chance of being a mine. That's what we've always said we want to look in Brunswick. We're not just looking for lithium, we're looking for lithium mines. It is a core aspect of how we work. We're decidedly focused on trying to, shockingly, kill our assets. We're not here to waste investor time. We're not here to waste our time. We're not here to waste our money. We are always looking to kill a particular asset, because if we can't kill it, then it has a real chance of being something. It has a real chance of being a mine. That's how we work around this asset. That's how we work around our entire portfolio. Since day one, we recognize the tools and the efficiency of exploration. We knew we could take a large-scale portfolio across the entirety of Canada and rapidly sort through it to end up to a few projects. That's why exploration as a whole is tough, because your success rate is inherently going to be shockingly low, lower than anyone would like to admit, even myself. And so when we end up with not just Mirage, but things like Anatacao in our portfolio, we're heartened. We know that we have a winning strategy that we can continue to execute beyond Quebec into other areas, not just Canada, but also Greenland. We're going to take that international step, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So look, for us right now, when it comes to Mirage, it's about continuing to grow this asset base. We have a clear focus in terms of understanding what is a lithium mine, not just from grades, not just from tons, but also from metallurgy. And every time we work Mirage, we feel confident that it is the type of asset that is going to generate a potential mine. We are focused on that. Right now, we are going to be starting our summer campaign in the coming weeks. We will be making an announcement around that, and we'll provide more details in terms of what we want to drill. But we are absolutely focused on Mirage. Our view, if anything, is to find the second one. This is our core, the core of the company. This central area here, this 2.5 by 2.5 kilometer area, is where we are spending the majority of our time. It is where we continue to find more things, and it is where we will continue to increase the size of what we have found. But we have expertise. Very few companies have seen as many rocks as we have. Very few people have seen the breadth of exploration as Brunswick. And so when we think about, that country aspect to us, we're now more and more focused on Quebec. We're now thinking from the perspective of where one needs to find lithium. If there's going to be a vertical that develops in Quebec from a refining perspective and from a manufacturing perspective, if it can't feed into that refining, to us, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to be looking at taking a hard look at the rest of our portfolio and see how well does it square into that. Obviously, in Quebec, we're lucky because we have the Anatacao project that we're working on right now. If I jump to Anatacao here, and bear with me, there we go. So Anatacao is really two projects, Anatacao West and Anatacao Main. Anatacao West is, the single unconsolidated asset in the region of what is going to be a future mine. This red line that you see here is a property boundary with Arcadium, a US $6 billion market cap company. It is right next door to James Bay, the James Bay project, where they've defined a 50 million ton reserve and a 100 million ton resource. This is the continuation of the pegmatites from their property onto our property. This is an asset that we continue to grow. We drilled this last year. It has more opportunities to continue increasing. But we know that there's actually more to do at Anatacao itself. Last year, we announced the discovery of a showing. But actually, there's a number of other areas across this entire property where we simply just didn't have time to follow up, where we see the geochemical signal that we are dealing with evolved pegmatites that have the potential of containing lithium. So this summer, we are going to go back there This summer, we are going to look at the extensions of the Anna is showing, which you see right here. We are doing a major till program across the eastern edge of this property, heading towards the east from the western edge of this property. We're going to be doing a major till program. This program is going to look at uncovering new spodumene mineralization beyond what is currently known, with a target of drilling in this area in the late fall. Again, we'll have more announcements around that once we've completed our till survey, both at Anatikau and Anatikau West, because we do believe that there's covered potential there. And so we are very excited to be pushing across there. But let's go back talking about, where we see Brunswick and how we see Brunswick evolving. In our view is very simple. Quebec has potentially enough lithium, and I mean this as an industry, to supply all of North America. That's the scale and scope of the deposits that are being found here. Maybe there'll be other mines built across the rest of North America, but the grade, the scale, the metallurgy of the assets here, I think could surprise a lot of people. It could meet everything that one needs for North American production. And so when we took a look at our exploration program earlier this year and said, well, how do we leverage all this expertise we've built? How do we leverage, the fact that hardly any other team has seen as many rocks as our team? And we quickly came to the realization that, well, there are areas that we can explore, that we can leverage this while still feeding into this strategy, into this, sectorial lithium strategy. And so that's why we explored it and are starting to explore in Nunavik. That's why we're going to start exploring in Labrador. That's why we're going to be the first movers to explore in Greenland. Not for North America, but for Europe, because they themselves need lithium and their deposits are either too small or don't have social acceptability to compete against the type of assets that we have here in Quebec or across the entire world. And so we are, again, looking at that market approach to our exploration strategy. It's not just exploring to explore. It is focused. It is well thought out exploration. It is also, when it comes to grassroots exploration, something that is quite affordable, something that is easy for us to start working. As I mentioned before, in Greenland, we are absolutely the first movers. Everyone else has always gone there for the exact same thing: gold, copper, nickel, and a smattering of either lead, zinc, or other, minor commodities, be it rare earth or something like this. That doesn't make any sense to me. Greenland has all of the smoke that you see across all of the best areas for lithium exploration, for hard rock lithium exploration. And that's why we are absolutely focused on moving there. And it's shocking to me that no one ever thought about exploring for lithium there. Again, when we started doing our work, we could clearly tell that this area has significant potential. And so we're extremely excited to have, to be moving as quickly as possible into a brand new jurisdiction and to grow Brunswick, to leverage this expertise that exists in almost no other company out there, both in North America or outside. And that's how we will continue working this company. Obviously we have to be, cognizant of the market and the fact that lithium is undergoing some turbulence, so to speak, but we will never stop working. Our belief is one that you need to, as a junior, you need to continue moving. If you just start and stop, then nothing is going to happen. So we will always be doing work, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more in the context of the market. But we are not willing to abandon this expertise that we have built, this team that is built, and this success that we are building inside the company. It is something that is quite unique. We have our eyes on the prize of forming one of the largest, one of the best lithium exploration company, not just in Canada, but in the world. and we want to continue proving that as much as possible. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions. Obviously, this summer is going to be one that is going to be quite active. We are going to be pushing on drilling at Mirage. As I mentioned, we'll have something on that side quite shortly, as well as we are going to be working across the rest of our portfolio because we want to leverage that expertise. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Killian. Thank you for introducing us to both of the projects and your portfolio. So I guess we can get started on the question now. Just as a reminder to everyone on the line, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So a couple of questions, Killian. I know in the past, you've talked about not putting all of your eggs in one basket, and you alluded to this in the presentation. But given that both Mirage and Anatakaw, Maine have something there, especially in the context of this market, why not focus on those two areas for now, and when things turn around, look at the other projects in the portfolio?
Actually, that's a great question. It's always the question of work. When we take a step back and put a generic project out there, right, of any type. It doesn't have to be in lithium, it can be in any commodity. Doing the first few steps are so cost effective that it is almost irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Drilling at Mirage, drilling an asset is so significantly more expensive than the prior step of prospecting that it's almost being two different worlds. Just like building a mine is so much more expensive than exploring for that mine, than drilling it out. It's that same logic is applied. So in reality, for shaving off 500 meters of drilling at Mirage, I get to complete a full campaign across the rest of my portfolio and continue driving forward. Again, my view is that in a few years, and by a few years, more than likely by next year, almost all of the discoveries on the lithium side will have been completed. When you look at the amount of discoveries that have happened, when you think about what, the discovery rate looks like in other commodities, and the fact that when it comes to lithium, you cannot leverage things like remote sensing, that you have to be boots on the ground, there's going to be reaching a very, very quick point before we've made all the discoveries. And I say this as an industry. And so our view is, you know what? I don't want to be in a position where I say, well, gee whiz, I wish I pushed a little bit harder. We thought about that idea and it would have cost us $10,000 to test it. And maybe it would have generated a $100 million return for my investors. And so that's sort of the mindset that we work around it. It is so cost efficient. When we look at our portfolio, when we look at the work that we do, 90% of it is Mirage. 5%, well, I should say 85% is Mirage, 10% is Anatakaw, and that remaining 5%, that's the grassroots program. It is so cost efficient. It is not something that steals from the other project. What we have found at Mirage is absolutely special and is something that we want to continue growing.
Okay, thanks for that, Killian. Second question, are you looking for a partner?
Actually, that's a good question. In Brunswick, it's always been our view. We've never been partner agnostic. What makes sense for my investors is what makes sense for Brunswick. I will remind again, and I know I've said it before, when it comes to my shareholders, my number one shareholders is Mr. Bob Wears. It's public information. He owns over 40 million shares. I'm not looking to dilute him to nothing. I'm not looking to completely blow up my capital structure. If I take care of him, I take care of every other investor out there. That's what it boils down to. And so we are exploring every alternative in terms of advancing the company. A lot of people forget it's not just about controlling the dilution, but it's also who you raise capital with. The last thing you want to do is put money with a hedge fund just because you're doing a financing, and then 3 months later you're eating those shares all over again. It doesn't look very smart. And so for me, it's really important the who I'm raising capital with, and that's what we're exploring. Partners, strategic partners, of which there's many different kinds, are exactly those type of people, whether it's at the corporate level or at the project level. Those are people who share long-term views, who are going to advance the project, who are not going to sell the shares for a quick buck, that will see it true to the successful end. And so that is exactly what we're thinking. We're always looking at different options out there, and we'd rather take the best deal than a deal out there. That's what it boils down to when it comes to advancing our projects.
I guess a follow-up question to that. So in addition to Bob, who are the major shareholders?
So we do have, management insiders, which includes Bob, adds up to about 36% of the company, which is a plethora of, yes, the board, but it'll also include a few family friends, some of the affiliated, executives in the Osisco group. We do have another family office that accounts for another roughly, right now, around 15%. We do have a number of, we'll say, the classic Quebec Inc. shareholders, who also represent another, roughly 8 to 10%. We have a nice broad base. We do have a number of institutional shareholders, international institutional shareholders out of Europe, out of Australia, out of the US, out of Canada as well, that account for another roughly 25%. So all said and done, we do have a good view on roughly 75% of the stock out there, which is it's pretty good, to be quite honest, for what we're trying to do.
Okay, next question. Does anyone provide research yet?
You mean for Brunswick? Well, yes, Red Cloud does provide research. We're also informally covered at a few other shops, if you will. There's just not a lot of assets out there. In the month to give you, let's take perspective. Let's think about what Mirage looks like right now. In the month of May, when we released that 93 meters at 1.5%, turns out we were the second best drill hole in the entire lithium industry around the world. That gives you some context for what we're doing inside Brunswick. Right? That gives you some context for what we're trying to achieve here. This is an asset that every time we work into it, we're cracking the top 10 lithium or drill intercept for the month when we put out a drill hole for it. Not a lot of companies can say that, right? Whether it be in copper, gold, that speaks to what we are uncovering here, and we are going to continue pushing that forward. That's why it's our core asset inside the company, all right? And so for us, it is absolutely, something that strikes the imagination, that captures a lot of interest out there. Yes, with Red Cloud, but also with other groups.
Okay, Killian, how much cash does the company have?
So right now we're sitting on just over $6 million. We're expecting some tax credit to come in for nearly another $1 million. That covers the work that we want to do. Again, to us, it's about sustainable work, but we're always going to be working. We're at no point are we gonna just say, nah, that's it, we're stopping, we're not doing anything else. That is not if a junior does that, why are you owning that junior? Just go buy the underlying commodity at that point in price, because at least you won't be faced with dilution. And so that is quite honestly our view. We are always going to be pushing the needle. We are always going to be doing work going forward. It's always going to be in relation to the context of the market. If the market's slower, then we'll be slower, but we're always going to be doing something. So
that would get you to the end of the year?
Yeah, it gets us to the end of the year. To me, I've always viewed it as a valve. It's always going to be a trickle of water. Maybe the valve's a little bit more open, maybe it's a little bit more closed. And so we judge that based on the market, our cash position, the opportunities in front of us. If we see it good, we open it a little bit and we keep going. But we're always going to keep that. We're always going to keep it going.
Okay, well, I think that's it for all the questions, Killian. Thank you so much for taking time to host this webinar with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Just as a reminder to our audience, our next webinar will feature Lomico Metals, and that's on July 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.